The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Welcome back to Rushcliffe again, everybody. Can you believe the weather? It's changed again. It's nice and beautiful, bright sunny day now. Compared to the last three you've just seen, it's a completely different setup, isn't it? Well, I'm glad the sun's come out because this is a beautiful little town. And I know this place sort of fairly well. I've been through it a couple of times in my life, but I've never actually explored it. Now it's time to put that right. This is Bingham. Bingham, Binner's homestead. Today in Rushcliffe we come to one of the district's towns. This is the beautiful Bingham, located just off the A46 and the A52. With a population in excess of 10,000, Bingham is twinned with Wallenfels in Bavaria, Germany. Many bands and musical groups have visited Bingham from Germany over the years, and many more have made the reverse trip. Bingham was here long before any axe-wielding Bavarians started to play to the Nottinghamshire locals, though. Bingham's history begins with the Coritani, a tribe of Britons that governed most of the East Midlands. They set up a fort where modern-day Bingham is, and they called it Margidunum, which meant Fort of the King's Plain. This name would later be Latinised to Margidunum when the Romans built their own fortress, the ruins of which lay north of Bingham today. The Romans also created a secondary settlement at a river crossing called Ad Pontum, which today we know as East Stoke. The name Bingham comes from the chief of the Anglo-Saxon tribe that settled the town, Binner. It was founded around the start of the 7th century and would have originally been oval-shaped, surrounded by a ditch and huts. At that time it was surrounded by marshland, which was extremely fertile once it was drained. Since then, it's got rather big. Even though it's a small town by UK standards, it's massive by our usual ones. This, therefore, is a 3-hour walk. Let's get cracking, shall we? To begin with, we're taking a drive through the newest area of a town that just keeps expanding. Bingham has grown considerably since it was founded in the 7th century, and it continues to do so today. These new houses north of the town are known as the Romans' Quarter. So let's get started with the Roman history. Bingham partially stands on the site of the Roman fortress named Margidunum. In true Roman fashion, they adapted the name given to it by the early Britons. Finds of military equipment established that it was initially a military post in about 55 to 60 AD, although no parts of a fort structure have been found. That said, Roman forts were sited at close intervals along the Foss Way to protect their territory from the hostile Brigantes and the Iceni. A civilian settlement then developed on either side of the Foss Way, indicated by several simple rectangular buildings. 2 Roman villas have been found within 3 kilometres of the settlement, as well as Roman farms in the surrounding area. The fort was protected to the south and east by marshland, and Margidunum remained occupied until about 500 AD. So where is Margidunum now? Well, it lies mostly across 3 fields, but today they're partially covered by a roundabout which was built in 1968. It's also close to the modern-day Margidunum Junction on the A46. With the Romans' Quarter, Bingham now has a lasting memory of its connections to the greatest European empire there ever was. That said, these houses are nothing like Roman villas. Among the brand new builds, there's a new school, but that's not the only new amenity Bingham's gained thanks to all of this. We'll see more shortly. Now I've stopped here because it's in this area where 14-year-old Jack Archer was killed a few years ago by being knocked off his bike. It was a hit-and-run crash, the perpetrator being an uninsured driver who torched his car to destroy evidence. He's since been jailed. Instead of stopping to help, he fled the scene, leaving the fatally injured teenager by the roadside. Jack came from nearby Newton. Here in Bingham, though, the lad has a lasting memorial, a white bike chained to a lamppost near the spot where he was killed. Back in the car, next we've got a brand new Lidl supermarket. The Chapel Lane store is now the town's largest supermarket, ahead of both Sainsbury's and the Co-op, which are on Market Street. Built at a cost of £2 million, it includes a 1,424 square metre sales area and 155 parking spaces, as well as bicycle storage, electric vehicle charging points and recycling facilities. Its construction created some 30 jobs, and many who work here live in Bingham. That's not all. Bingham has also gained a brand new leisure centre as part of these new developments. This replaced a former leisure centre next to Toot Hill School, which opened in 1969. That one's actually still open, and we'll see it later on the main walk. The new facility opened in 2023. Dubbed the Bingham Arena, it covers a massive 5,500 square metres and has a 25-metre swimming pool, a fitness centre and a therapy suite. It also has a community hall and office suites too. In keeping with environmental policies these days, Bingham Arena is a low-carbon facility. The pool has a steel frame as opposed to a concrete lining, for example. There are also photovoltaic panels on the roof of the office building and LED lighting throughout. Lastly, before we get to walking properly, here's a signal box. We'll see the line this is on in a bit. It was constructed in 1875 and it's a GNR Type 1B. There's one for the railway nuts. It closed in 2015, but the fact it still stands is significant. It's one of the few remaining historical sites in Bingham, and personally, I hope it's never demolished. Okay, so now it's time for the main walk, and this is a biggie. This is quite a big town. It's the biggest parish that Rushcliffe has got, so there's lots to see here. Our start and aim point is this little park. It's miles out of town. It's quite a way away. It's along the road towards Grantham. But the reason I've chosen to park here is simply because even though there's free parking in the town, I think it's better to start somewhere quiet and work up to the bigger areas, if you know what I mean. So yeah, we'll get going from here. We're heading towards a school first. The first section of this walk is all residential. Bingham has a few areas like this, and they're going to be helpful. It means I can throw in bits I can't fit in elsewhere. For example, Bingham has some Civil War history. It stood in the middle of the parliamentary stronghold of Nottingham and the royalist stronghold in Newark. Prince Rupert, on his way to relieve Newark, encamped in the fields surrounding Bingham. Given that 700 Roundhead soldiers sought refuge in Bingham, a conclusion could be drawn that it was generally sympathetic to the parliamentary cause, especially given that many men from the town would have died in battles around Nottingham. Our first actual landmark is Carnarvon School. Despite the name, this has nothing to do with the town in Wales. Instead, this is the first connection we'll come across between Bingham and the Carnarvon family. The Canavan family are alternatively known as the Earls of Chesterfield, the same mob that we mentioned in Shelford, hence the name of the pub there. Canavan House in Bingham is built on what was once part of the Shelford estate, owned of course by the Earls of Chesterfield. The Chesterfield-Carnarvon dynasty managed the development of Bingham in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The 5th Earl sold many freeholds in 1920 to fund his excavations in Egypt with Professor Howard Carter. They culminated in the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922. The school has a bit more history to tell. Before it was built in the late 1960s, contractors discovered a Roman villa and skeleton whilst laying pipes, further cementing Bingham's Roman roots. Next we have to cross Crow Close. This is a field which is a bit of a mystery. Nobody really knows what it is or was, but historians reckon it might be the site of a deserted medieval village. If it is, the reasons for its abandonment are unknown. In 2019, a survey of the site using laser scanning determined the earthworks on display here are likely the remains of a post-medieval house, estate buildings, and a few roads. Various models have been postulated, including Crow Close and Bingham as twin medieval villages, or indeed that Crow Close was the original site for Bingham before the marketplace was developed. Complicating the matter further, a document dated 1586 describes a close owned by Robert Porter. The Porters lived in Bingham until 1754, when the estate was inherited by Henry Sherbrooke. Could this have been where their principal residence was? I do love a good patch of earthworks, me, and Crow Close is full of some absolutely excellent ones that are very well pronounced. The trouble is the camera doesn't really pick them up very well, so you have to kind of see them with your own two eyes, I suppose. Not all of Crow Close is earthworks. There's a patch that's been turned into a little playground. It's currently behind the camera. We're going to walk past that next as we head towards our next landmark. The Anglican parish church of St Mary and All Saints is next. This is a Grade 1 listed medieval building, heavily restored between 1845 and 46 and again in 1912. It has a peal of 8 bells and a 19th century organ. It belongs to the Diocese of Southwell and Nottingham. During the reign of Elizabeth I, Bingham Manor was owned by Sir Brian Stapleton, who lived in Carlton, although he lent out the manor to a man named Thomas Leake, who was possibly the maternal grandfather of Bess of Hardwick. At that time, Bingham had a lot of common land, which was managed by the Manor Court. The court, which consisted of 5 elected officers, met at the church or around its gate. The 5 men were a foreman of the fields, a Hayward in charge of the grazing land, a Pinder in charge of the pinfold, a ringer for the hogs and swine, and a Woodward who managed the felling of trees. Now, whilst Crow Close remains a mystery, there's no such problem with this. This is Butfield, which has been used for many, many years as the town's main recreational space. Bingham Cricket Club and Bingham Town Football Club have both called this their home ground. Originally comprising of a wide open space with a cricket square at its centre, it's seen its fair share of change over the decades. The name Butfield suggests that this is where archers once practised. During the 1980s, a pavilion was erected to serve as changing rooms for the various clubs using Butfield at the time. The building was originally a temporary structure, whilst funding was sought for something more permanent. During the same period, tennis courts were built and for a number of years were used by Bingham Tennis Club until they moved away to better facilities in the mid-1990s. Since 1999, it had been the aim of the town council to improve the facilities at Butfield. The building of hundreds of new homes began in the 1990s, and with that came a considerable increase in residents who wanted to take part in sporting activities. Improvements to the site were heavily delayed due to contamination, a leftover of the Bingham Gas and Coke Works. Finally, though, improvements began in 2008. The new facility opened in 2009 and has been in constant use since. It was opened by football legend Nigel Clough and Kenneth Clarke, the former Rushcliffe MP. A bit of luck there that I've caught part of a football match going on. Would have been cool to catch a goal. I nearly did, to be honest with you, but for a great save by the keeper at this end. But yeah, it's cool to see a football match actually occurring while I'm walking around. Brilliant. Now then, next is the train station. So we're going to keep following this path which goes through Butfield and ends up on the platform. And just my luck, I took one step onto the station platform and somebody scored. Brilliant. Now we come to the railway station on the Nottingham to Skegness line. Bingham has had a station since 1850 and it was first opened by the Ambergate, Nottingham, Boston and Eastern Junction Railway before being taken over by the Great Northern Railway. The station buildings were designed by our favourite Nottingham architect, Thomas Chambers Hine. Between 1879 and 1953, Bingham was also served by a second station, Bingham Road. It was used for London and North Western Railway services between Nottingham and Northampton. Today, from this station, there's generally an hourly service daily westbound to Nottingham and eastbound towards Grantham and Skegness. Now we're in the town centre. Bingham was granted a market charter in 1314 and has held a market every Thursday since then. The marketplace is Bingham's focal point and features the Buttercross, where farmers' wives would display their baskets of butter and cheese. The Buttercross was erected in 1861 in memory of John Hassell, the Earl of Chesterfield's popular land agent. Thomas Chambers Hine designed it. The Buttercross you see here replaced a similar, earlier one that had become derelict. You may note on closer inspection the end of a gas pipe and some brackets that were fitted to supply a lamp in the roof. This was added thanks to the proximity of the gasworks north of the railway line. There have always been shops in the marketplace and many of those here today have replaced older, dilapidated ones. Around the square are buildings of many periods. There are far too many to talk about them all, but there is one that caught my eye. You know I can't resist a Wetherspoons. Bingham has one and it's called the Buttercross because it faces the memorial we've just seen. There's always been a pub here though. It stands on the site of a former inn known as the Crown. Here's another school for you, and this is actually part one of two. This is Robert Miles Junior School, built in the 1960s, occupying the site of the old rectory. It had stood here since 1764, and the rectory was the birthplace of Robert Lowe, the Chancellor of the Exchequer from 1868 until 1873. Robert Miles himself lived in the building too for a short time. Miles was a wealthy evangelical who restored Bingham's church and made other improvements to the town. It was he who started a night school for men and boys who couldn't attend day school and a Sunday school for children under 6. Today, he's remembered by way of 2 schools bearing his name. It's the medical centre next. This brand new facility was built in 2017, replacing a previous health centre that served the town from 1970 onwards. Construction of this involved demolishing a cottage and some outbuildings. The building was designed by an experienced team who used a concrete podium on the ground floor and a prefabricated timber frame on the first floor. Okay, we're at an important little crossroads here. This is Fairfield Street. We've got to go over this to carry on with the route. It might look semi-familiar because up in that direction is where the signal box is and all the other stuff that we did in the Romans Quarter at the beginning of the video. So let's get over the road there. Our next landmark is the other Robert Miles School. Robert Miles Part 2, this infant school was built in 1909. Fun fact, Miles's son, Frank, was an artist and he was friends with both Oscar Wilde and Lily Langtry. As such, both were frequent visitors to Bingham. It's the Rugby Club next. Bingham Rugby Club was formed in 1971. In 2022, the club celebrated its 50th anniversary with a ball here at its Brendan Grove ground. The event was attended by over 200 people, including the club's last surviving founding member, Bob Williams. Former Leicester Tigers player Tim Stimpson was the guest speaker. Bingham were once able to field 3 sides. Until 1986, when they moved here to their present pitches, they played at Toot Hill School. And once across Winhill Park, we're then heading into another housing estate. Now, what this next section will do effectively, it'll take us around a supermarket towards the linear walk, which is the route of an old railway line, and that in turn will take us to Toot Hill School, before heading back, of course, then into the town centre. It's a big old town, there's still plenty more to see. Since 1901, Bingham has expanded vastly. Although some buildings in the centre of town were built in the 18th century, the majority of the buildings in Bingham are relatively new. Most of the houses are post-war efforts. The first major wave of growth in the town happened around the time of the Industrial Revolution, as the workforce expanded and more housing was needed for a growing population. This was compounded by the arrival of the railways in 1851. The agricultural sector began to decline, and cottage industries like lace and stocking knitting were overtaken by factories in Nottingham. Bingham would see high levels of poverty and unemployment. Now, as well as a Lidl, Bingham also has an Aldi these days. In 2014, Aldi submitted plans to build a brand new store in the town on the site of Bingham Garage, Foley Books and 3 former homes on Nottingham Road. That they did, creating a store of some 1,767 square metres. It opened in March of 2015, and the first 100 customers received a golden envelope, giving them the chance to win a 55-inch TV, tablet PCs, radios and bags of Aldi shopping. The store was officially opened by children from Bingham Town Juniors FC, who were then sponsored by Aldi for the next 3 years. Now, we've seen an active railway line already here, but how about one that's gone? This is the Linear Walk, a long disused railway line that once linked Nottingham to Melton Mowbray. The line was closed in 1962. In 1977, Bingham Town Council bought a stretch of the old line from Nottingham Road to the River Smite for £10. What a bargain that was. They then worked with volunteers to create a nature reserve that was opened in 2004 by Professor David Bellamy. When this was an active line, it provided trains with an alternative route to Nottingham using both the Glendon and Manton Railway and the Manton and Melton Mowbray sections of the Syston and Peterborough Railway. Trains to Leeds and Bradford tended to use this route rather than the main Midland route. We're going to use it to get to Toot Hill School. Follow me, folks. When Toot Hill School was built, its existence provided the basis for Bingham's original sports centre. It had 2 swimming pools, a sports hall, 2 gymnasia, squash courts, a licensed bar and an outdoor all-weather pitch. The scheme was reported in the Daily Telegraph in 1968, and its first manager was Dave Thomas. Of course, now Bingham Arena is the modern leisure centre, but some of the old facilities are still here. Dickinson's Real Deal was filmed in the old leisure centre in 2015 before being broadcast on ITV a year later. Speaking of TV, Bingham was a location in Midlands film director Shane Meadows' film 24/7, which contained scenes shot at Toot Hill Topfield, the Linear Walk and at Bingham Boxing Club. Bingham also appeared in 2 episodes of the classic sitcom Auf Wiedersehen Pet. Yeah, this is not my pleased face. I had to cut through the leisure centre to actually get to this point because there's a public right-of-way around the side of the leisure centre with a gate that's locked. It should not be locked. I'm very lucky that there was a door open in the leisure centre and someone kindly guided me to the exit. I tell you, I'm frustrated right now. Let's head for the school, which is right next door. Toot Hill School is a co-educational secondary school and sixth form which is a member of the Nova Education Trust. Since 2015 it's also been a school centre for initial teacher training, or SCIT for short. Quite a few notable people have attended this school and its predecessor which stood here before it. Jim and Linda Arnold were students at the old Toot Hill School from 1954 until 1957. They were known as the Canadian Twins, and many a Bingham resident will have heard of them. Since then, notable alumni have included Chris Urbanowitz, the guitarist from Editors, Joe Hayes, the professional rugby union player for Leicester Tigers, Daniel Taylor, the British football journalist, and Harrison Dowsall, the West End performer best known for appearing as Billy in Billy Elliot the Musical. Now we've come this far and only seen one pub. That's all about to change though. Bingham has 6 and they're all pretty close together. This is the White Lion, a pub that's undergone many changes over time, including the relocation of its main entrance. The basic structure remains the same though, even with the large flat-roofed extension that's been added in recent times. Of all the conversions of period buildings in Bingham, the White Lion is unique in that reproduction wooden shutters have been included on the ground floor windows. Bingham Library next. This has been in existence since the late 1950s and has a rich history. The library began as a charity penny library in a lean-to on Newgate Street. The county library eventually took over and moved to Eaton Place in 1973. The library has a large collection of local history materials, including hundreds of mounted images from the 1850s to the 1980s. There are maps and plans from around 1790 to the early 21st century. You can also get your hands on local newspapers, some of which date back to the 1850s. The history of the Methodist Church in Bingham is a little more involved. Originally, Bingham had a Wesleyan chapel that was built in 1818 and renovated in 1869. There was also a primitive Methodist chapel here too, built in 1849 and located on the upper floor of a set of cottages. The Wesleyan chapel was modernised over the years by an additional schoolroom, parlour, Third World shop, lobby and the Dunsmore room, all of which served Bingham well over the years but became a maintenance nightmare. The schoolroom had a corner which appeared to be sinking, the Dunsmore room had become attractive to the procurers of lead and leaked in various places, and the parlour had one wall that remained damp throughout the year. Now the town has this, the new Bingham Methodist Church and Social Centre, which opened in 2016. It's intended to be a place of Christian worship and community. What of the primitive chapel then? Well, the Horse and Plough can answer that question. This pub was the location of that chapel. As mentioned, it occupied the upper floor, with steps up to it which are now hidden by a side extension. On the ground floor were cottages. This would have been an economical way to build for a society who were mostly farm labourers. The chapel was opened by Lorenzo Dow, an American evangelist, and Dorothy Ripley, originally from Whitby, who had travelled with Dow from America. It is said that so many people came to the opening that they could not all get in. So Dorothy Ripley preached in the open air, perhaps from the steps. Afterwards, the pair were arrested for inciting a riot. So obviously we dealt with the Buttercross and that sort of side of the town centre earlier. Now we're dealing with the other side of the town centre, as you may have gathered. All the landmarks now are sort of clustered together in one area. We'll get through them quite quickly like that. Let's go. Another inn next, and it's the turn of the Wheatsheaf, a Grade 2 listed pub and kitchen that dates back to 1779. Ignore the date of 1792 on the front. There's a brick inside that bears the earlier date. The Wheatsheaf is of a classic late 18th century East Midlands design. It has multiple building phases, with the rear portion being a later addition. The original roofline was lower and more steeply pitched, suggesting it was perhaps once thatched. The building was once a homestead surrounded by arable land, an orchard and a wood. During World War I, the inn had stablings for up to 70 horses. These days it's got 5 luxury guest rooms above it. The adjacent former school and coffee rooms are known as Long Acre Studios. These might originally have been a malt house and are possibly of a similar age. That's speculative though, nobody really knows. The 3-star Bingham Townhouse Hotel now, which sits within 5 minutes walk of the Buttercross. The Townhouse offers 16 rooms with such modern conveniences as flat-screen TVs and walk-in showers, all mod cons and that. The Townhouse has another connection to the world of TV. 4 in a Bed Series 11 Episode 18 was filmed here in 2016 and first aired in that year's late autumn. After World War II, the former Bingham Rural District Council inspected the state of over 2,000 houses in the area to see if they needed to be demolished or could be repaired for redevelopment. It was decided that farming property should remain out in the countryside instead of mixed in with the rest of Bingham. Some notable buildings were destroyed, like Stanhope Workhouse, drastically changing the look of the town. The 1960s and 70s saw almost constant development, with new houses being built to accommodate the local population. Now we come to the old courthouse. Located on Church Street, this was built in 1852 as a courthouse, with prison cells and quarters for police officers. It's now the offices of Bingham Town Council. The door to the prison cells with the original lock and viewing slot is now sealed up. This building was for centuries Bingham's administration of law and order. Mental that, when you consider that it's only 25 metres away from the church gate. Well, at least until a county court was established in the marketplace. There's now a separate police station on Grantham Road. Finally, we have the cemetery, the last landmark on the route before we head back to where we began. To understand this, we first have to discuss the churchyard's boundaries and how they've changed over time. The majority of headstones in the churchyard date from the 18th and 19th centuries, with a few from the 17th. The oldest is dated 1681. In the Middle Ages, the boundaries were different and the churchyard extended to the south across the road. Bingham's townsfolk back then probably couldn't have envisaged just how big the place would grow. In 1840, half an acre was added to the northern side to accommodate the obvious increase in population. It was closed for burials in the late 19th century, but some family plots continued to be used for a while. Replacing it all was this, a Victorian cemetery that was designed as an arboretum with specimen trees, and this continues to be used to this day. And after 3 hours and a little bit, there is the park where we began this mammoth walk around Bingham. I tell you what, that has not been the easiest of walks, especially with a right of way that was closed off. I'm sorry I got frustrated about that, by the way, but legally speaking, rights of way are there for a reason, and you have to have a really good excuse to close one off, otherwise it's illegal. And I can't see any reason why that gate was closed, and I had to nip through the leisure centre. But I got there in the end, and we got all the way around Bingham. That's it for this episode, but it's not for me, because this place has got a Wetherspoons, as we know, and I'm off there now because I think I've earned me tea. Rushcliffe is down to the final 8, and among them are some of the largest on offer. With Bingham in the books, it feels like we've reached a bit of a milestone. This was the biggest, so in theory, it's all plain sailing now. I can guarantee that's not going to be the case though. Join me tomorrow for another Rushcliffe episode as we wrap the week up in style. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.